time anyway. Hello, everybody. If you're thinking about moving to Toronto, Ontario, Canada, or just want to move there or go there or just want to move there, that's what I said at the beginning, or you want to vacation there or visit somebody like Connie beside me here, this is the episode for you. I do have Connie Sarvanandan. I said it right, right?
Nice.
Enough ands in there. Connie Sarvanandan with Remax in Toronto, Canada. This is Wanna Move There, the show giving Central Pennsylvanians the info they need to decide whether or not they want to move to a different area. Or if you want to vacation somewhere, it gives you some good info and a good person to contact, because that's why I like having realtors on, because they know everything. If you need a tour guide, even if you don't need a house, the realtors are always the best tour guides. And actually, that's a question. Yeah, I'll do it before I do because I'm going to forget it. Realtor. Every time I talk to a Canadian, I've been setting these episodes up, and I usually put like Jim Smith, comma Realtor. Are you guys realtors there? Is that a thing up there?
We are realtors, and we have recently been allowed to use real estate agent. We weren't allowed to say agent before, and they recently said you can now use real estate agent. But very particular about the usage, and you can never say realtor when you were a student or anything like that. So yeah, yes, we are.
Great.
I thought
That's good
you know
to
what I
know.
thought you were going to ask me? I thought you were going to ask me if we said realtor versus realtor, because there are people that say realtor for whatever reason, but that's not a Canadian thing.
Yeah, that'll drive a brother nuts, but yeah, that's why they came out with that whole pronunciation. It's real tour, which is also weird, but they made it that weird so that we wouldn't say it the other way. And yeah. So
Yeah.
that's good to know. So now I can put realtor next to all my Canadian friends. That's why I didn't on yours, you could see, because I wasn't sure. But now I know. And is it the same way that all real estate agents are not necessarily a realtor? If you're a licensed agent, you then have to also join the Realtors Association?
Yes. So yeah, in order to use Realtor, it's part of the Canadian Association, whereas real estate agent and sales representative are part of your licensing and what you're allowed to say as far as your licensing goes. And my licensing is done by Ontario, and then CREA, which is the Canadian Real Estate Association, is the Canadian one. So.
Gotcha. And now that we've geeked out on something that people probably don't care enough about, but I did it. We'll continue. I am your host, DerekBicksler, Realtor of 15 years right here in Central PA. I grew up on the hill in Harrisburg, went to Mechanicsburg High School, go Wildcats, went up to Penn College of Technology up in Williamsport, where the Little League World Series is. And we always hated it, Connie, because it's the week that we moved in, and there's only one highway into the town, and it just disrupted everything. And it's old news to us, but it's kind of cool. And Juan, his son or his nephew, somebody was there, right?
Nephew, yeah.
Yeah, it's a fun thing, but that's where I went to college. Been back here ever since. Had a few sales jobs before I started selling real estate 15 glorious years ago. Like I said, if you need to buy or sell a home, please reach out to me, call me, text me, email me, throw a rock through my window, send a carrier pigeon, whatever you need to do. We still need inventory pretty badly. I hear people saying it's dying down, but I'm out there working with buyers and sellers, and it still seems pretty crazy. We're still losing offers left and right before you get one. And we'll talk about what it's like in Toronto a little bit in a second. A reminder, whether you're watching live or a replay, please ask a question in the comments above or below or whatever you're doing, or just say hi to us if you know one of us, and say where you're saying hi from or where you're asking a question from. We love to know where people are watching and listening from. And a reminder that all the replays are on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and on iTunes, Spotify, yada, yada. I said soon there. It's on there right now. I need to change that. It's on all the audio players right now when the episodes drop. And without further ado, I'm going to bring in Connie Sarvanandan, and I'm going to let you say hi while I find your bio, and I'm going to read a little bit. So say hi to everybody while I find that.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me on, Derek. It's exciting to be here, and I've been watching the other episodes, and it's really, you are right about realtors being great tour guides, because it's been really interesting to hear like there are cities that you've done, like Chicago, that I know, and I learned a lot in that episode. So it's been great.
Yeah, the thing that stuck with me is it's not called the Windy City because it's windy. Who knew? And you're kind of a similar area. We'll talk about that when we get to the weather. We won't get ahead of ourselves, but I'm wondering if it's windy where you are. So let's do your bio and then we'll get into the questions. You grew up in Toronto, so you're born and raised where you're at right now. You went to West Hill CI in Scarborough. What's CI? Or is that
Collegiate
CL?
Institute. Collegiate Institute. That's basically high school.
Gotcha. So it's high school, like college prep. Gotcha. West Hill Collegiate Institute in Scarborough. Went to the University of Western Ontario. And for those that don't know, Ontario, that's like a state here, right? It's called a province
Exactly.
up there, but to us
Yeah.
it'd be a state. Had a for Bachelor of Arts. Favorite color, electric blue, not just blue, electric blue. I like that. Not so good for printing though. It'd be good digitally, and then when
Yeah.
you go to get the print version of it, might not be the same.
Very true.
Uh,
Very true.
and your favorite food is mom's Sri Lankan. So is that's not a specific thing. That's anything Sri Lankan from your mom?
Yeah, my mom passed away in 2020, but she was an amazing cook, and that is definitely my favorite food. And I wasn't actually born in Toronto, born in Sri Lanka, and I came to Toronto when I was 4. So I was raised in Toronto. And my sisters are great cooks, and they've been trying to mimic my mom's Sri Lankan cooking. So it's been fun watching them try. She was just a very natural cook, and so. Yes, definitely my favorite.
Is there did she write down recipes? Is there a recipe book?
No, she
No.
was,
So you guys that could be fun just trying to figure it out.
yeah, exactly. She was not a
That's
recipe
fun.
person. And I think a lot of what she did was just very natural to her. And so she'd, taste it and add things and whatnot, which I am a terrible cook. So I did not inherit that at all. So
So not a lot of baking, I would guess, because baking is there's usually a specific recipe, I would guess.
yeah, no.
Yeah.
It's much more cooking and sauces and things like that. So
Sauces, stews, and do you put is on rice? Is that how you eat a lot of that stuff? Is that kind of thing?
rice is basically a staple, but we do things like naan and other things like that. And one of the things about Toronto is, I mean, we have a fantastic food scene in Toronto. It's amazing, and I'll talk about that as we get more into it. But Sri Lankan is just one of the many cuisines you can find in Toronto. And yes, you eat it on rice, you eat it on naan, and then we have other things that are basically carb based that you can use as your base.
Awesome. My favorite restaurant here is a Himalayan, I think it is, Yak and Yeti, which sounds similar, kind of like Indian, kind of like, a lot of the sauces and things on rice and naan bread, and it's the bomb. And I'm veganish, so those kind of cooking tend to go pretty well with that. You do have pets. Also, you do have kids, 2 of them, 16 and 14. And I see them on social media all the time. They seem to be doing awesome. And you're married to Francis. Does he go by Francis?
He does go by Francis. It's he's French Canadian, so it's Francis, but Francis or Francis. Like most people in Toronto call him Francis, but his father calls him Francis. His whole family calls him Francis. So
Nice. If you moved to New York, you'd be Frankie or something like that. That's probably not politically. I'm probably imitating something badly there, but and your hobbies are renovations. So you like working on your home, or maybe I know you have an investment property or two going, and then you like hiking, and you're a hockey mom. Tell us a little about that. Son play only?
no, both my kids play competitive hockey, and my husband coaches my daughter. So he is a hockey dad and he's a hockey coach, and he's constantly with her. And so as a result, I have been with my son for most of his hockey career. And he plays, we have a league called the GTHL in Toronto, and he plays this year. He's playing at the highest level of that league. So it's a lot of hockey. And so I'm definitely the hockey mom. I love it. And quite honestly, I've met some of my closest friends through hockey because you're spending so much time taking your kids to the rink. But hockey's a big thing in Toronto for sure. And my husband played when he was younger, the kids got into it when they were younger. I know how to skate very badly, but I never actually played the sport. So I learned it along with everything else. And when we were growing up, my dad was really into it too, even though he had never seen snow until he came to Canada. He was a big hockey fan too.
So how's your current slap shot?
My slap shot is not great, but we're pretty competitive. So I'm sure if my son, challenged me, I would go up against him, even though he's, way better than me. I just couldn't say no to the challenge. So
That'd be a fantastic TikTok reel, whatever.
yeah, exactly. And so it's funny because, people are, me and my son are always together and they're like, where's your daughter? Where's Maya? But when we're in a hockey season, she's with her dad the whole time. But it's also been great for their bonding and relationship as well. So it's lovely.
They're fairly close in age though, 14, 16, if I'm remembering. So would they ever at some time be on the same team?
They're 18 months apart. And at this point, their skill level is quite different. So she's in the lowest level of competitive and he's in the highest level of competitive. And so, and that's exactly where they want to be. And so they wouldn't compete, but they have played on the same team at school before. And they're super competitive with each other. They get along really well too. Well, I should say they either fight or they get along really well. There's nothing in between. So, yesterday they were throwing a football around, like that's just who they are. And we've just been both my husband and I like to be active. And so it's just something that they like doing. So, when I have a lot of friends who call me for advice on all these activities in Toronto, because if there's been an activity, I've probably tried it and I could tell you what's good and not good and, all of that other stuff. So yes, for sure.
Like I said, the realtors are the best tour guys. You probably, especially if you've been there most of your life since you were 4, I think you said. That's awesome. So a part of the culture there, and we'll talk a little bit more later, but part of the culture there is a big hockey. It's like football here. Hockey to you is like the football here.
It is. So we are definitely a hockey city and there's a lot of hockey and you can play hockey at all different levels. But what I find amongst my friends is either you're a hockey family or you're not, but you might be a dance family. You might be a football family. Football is big, but it's not as big as the US for sure. There's a lot of soccer players as well. Soccer is very popular here. And, so it depends on what you are into. So an interesting fact about Toronto is that 50% of more than 50% of the residents were not born in this country. So it provides a very diverse base of individuals. And, so if you're coming from Europe or you're coming from certain, like soccer is so big. And so if that's what your family is into, that's what they're into versus, my husband was raised on hockey. So hockey was kind of something that he really wanted our kids to do and enjoy. So it just depends on the sports, but all sports are around. And even for our professional teams, we have the Toronto Blue Jays, which is baseball. We have the Raptors, which is basketball. We have the Leafs, Toronto Maple Leafs, which is hockey, and then we have the Toronto FC, which is soccer. So we also have all the professional teams. So who you're supporting really depends on, the activity that appeals to your family.
Is the soccer in a dome?
It is. Well, the soccer is usually played. No, where they play, they don't play in a dome. No. So the season runs that, and there's been soccer games in the snow. So but their season doesn't run generally over the hardcore winter. So.
Sure. And it's probably home field advantage if you're playing in the snow, I would think, unless you're playing someone from Chicago, maybe they'd be similar.
Yeah. And even for my kids, like, when my son plays football and soccer, I've sat outside in the snow many times. And we do a lot of things outdoor in the winter. We have outdoor skating. We have all kinds of stuff in the winter. People are just used to being outside in the wintertime, because otherwise, otherwise you're not going to do a ton for 3 months out of the year. So we just get used to it and we just start doing stuff outside. And there's all kinds of activities and things to do, even restaurants and, people are set up for the winter. So we have festivals in the winter, we have parades in the winter. You're just used to it because we're a 4-season city and we're a 4-season country. So people just get used to it and they adapt and they do things to make it fun.
Yeah, similar to here. If you didn't do things because of the weather, you would never do anything. So just grin and bear it. And when you have that really nice day, then you're loving it. Before we move on to the questions about Toronto, I do want to know Bachelor of Arts for college. So what did you do before you were a real estate agent? And tell us why you did the arts major in the first place. That's what I want to know first.
Okay, so Bachelor of Arts here, arts encompasses everything. So business, it could be economics, it could be history, it could be, it's basically a general degree. So when you get a Bachelor of Arts, it's a general degree. So so I grew up in Toronto, went to high school in Toronto, then I went to Western. And when I was at Western, I just picked Bachelor of Arts because I didn't really know what I wanted to do at the time. And then while I was at Western, I got hired. When I graduated, I got hired by the Royal Bank, which is one of the big banks in Canada, in their management training program. And so I worked for the Royal for, I can't remember how many years, but probably two years. And it was probably, to this day, the toughest job I've ever had, because I was 22 years old and I had 11 direct reports because I worked in a branch. And it was, and it's, a lot of money, and it's a lot of money, meaning the transactions are large, you're responsible for a lot, but it taught me so much. But what I realized is that wasn't where I wanted to go. So then I got into sales and marketing, and I worked for several different companies in sales and marketing. I worked as a sales rep for Warner Lambert, which became Pfizer. And so I did confectionery, Trident, Dentine, Halls, things like that. I also did cookies and marketing for cookies. And at one point, I applied for a job, which was Power Bar, which I'm sure you know, the energy bar company. And the job was in California. So I moved to San Francisco, and I lived in San Francisco for 4 years. And I loved it. And I only came back home because my dad got sick. And so I did come back home, and I'm glad I did, because he ended up passing away a couple of years later. So it was the right decision, but I just absolutely loved my time in San Francisco. During that time too, we got bought out by Nestle. So I transferred from Nestle in San Francisco to the offices actually were in Berkeley, from Berkeley back to Toronto. And then when I got here, I worked in other companies.
That's perfect. Sorry to interrupt. That's because Nestle isn't that a British company, or it's a European company or something?
Yes, right? Their headquarters are in Switzerland. So
that's awesome.
So, it was great, and they were a great company to work for, and great with the move and everything else. But for the last 12 years, I worked for HBO Home Entertainment. HBO as in the television network, when you think Game of Thrones, right? So
now HBO Max, right?
Now it's HBO Max. So when I left HBO, I was SVP of International, which is Senior Vice President of International, which is everything outside of the US. So I had a team in Toronto, in London. I also had people in Germany and people in Denmark. And so it was a great job. I traveled a lot, but it was a fantastic job. I'm still quite close with my team, even though what happened was they decided to shut down International when AT&T bought us. So decided to make a career change. And so I decided to go into real estate. And the reason why is For the last 20 years, my husband and I have bought and sold real estate. We've done over 18 properties, and we've done everything. We started off with pre-construction, and then we did condos, then we did houses where we renovated them and flipped them, and then we did multifamily, and our most recent purchase was a farm. So we have a hobby farm, and it's about an hour outside of Toronto. And so what's been happening for the last 20 years is everybody calls me for advice on real estate. Everybody. And I've had real estate agents call me up for advice on real estate before I was an agent. So because of my varied experience. So I just thought that this was the perfect fit. And as soon as I got licensed, people were calling me. So I feel very fortunate. And now that I'm doing the job, I've gotten amazing training, particularly from Clubhouse, because the agents like you who have been like very abundant with their knowledge and sharing and everything else. But I'm loving it. I'm learning that I'm learning new things, but it's not things that you would think I would be learning. I'm learning about marketing versus, I know everything from a real estate side of because I've done it so much about the contracts and the negotiations and all of that stuff. But what I'm learning as an agent is really about the marketing and how you get out there and the prospecting and getting clients and things like that. So it's been great. And so that's how I ended up doing what I'm doing. So, and I love Toronto, and I could talk about Toronto all day long. So even I've lived outside of Toronto. I lived in San Francisco, which I loved as well. I've lived outside of Toronto for school. I've traveled everywhere. But Toronto is a great city. It really is a great city. So we have our pros and cons for sure, but it's a great city.
Well, you're in luck because we're going to talk about it for another 38 minutes right now.
Yay!
And everybody can check out your pros and cons video on your YouTube channel later too. So let's talk about the weather. We talked about it a little bit, but so I'll start with what it's like here, what we're comparing it to. No, I always forget this. I want to bring the map up, share my screen, and show everybody where Toronto is in case they don't know. And I forget this every single time. Here we go. There we go. Okay, so we got our map here. You can see the pin, and that's Toronto, and we'll zoom in. You can see it's up to the left of New York, to the right of Michigan, and it sits right on, or at least Toronto City proper sits right on Lake Ontario there. So where's Chicago? Detroit's a little bit south, looks like, of Toronto. So, and Chicago's south too.
3.5, 4 hour drive. Buffalo's about an hour to an hour and a half drive from Toronto.
So that gives everybody an idea, at least, what we're talking about, because I'm learning things too. Like, I didn't know that was right on the water. I knew whereabouts Toronto was, but I didn't,
Yeah.
So what's the weather like? So is it, do you get a lot of precipitation because you're on the lakes there?
Not necessarily. No, I mean, our waterfront is very akin to, say, a Chicago. So it's a big freshwater lake, and Toronto is actually surrounded by the Great Lakes. So you have Erie, because of our proximity to Erie, we're right near there, and we're also close to Huron. So there's lots of water all around. There isn't extra precipitation because of the proximity to water. And even I've lived close to the water, and there isn't anything extra because of it.
Not like living next to the ocean, or maybe I'm talking out of my butt there too. Maybe that's not true either. But you do get some snow, I think. And I want to know a little bit about that. Do you do schools close and stuff when you get snow? Do they salt? What's it like when it snows there?
Yeah, so when I said extra, so we are a 4-season country for sure, and a 4-season city for sure, and we definitely get lots of snow. The snow comes and goes, quite honestly, and over the past few years, it's been very inconsistent. But school closures maybe once or twice a year. It's not that common, or it's not what you would think, only because we as a city are very prepared for snow. So the plows are out. The plows start in November. They go until March. Like I mean, it's just a winter city. So they know how to manage it and everything else. The times when school closes is when there's a huge amount of snow and the plows just can't get to it and the roads become unsafe. So the school buses could become unsafe and things like that. But on a regular basis, my kids walk to school in snow. They come home in snow. They've been doing that since they were, they're in high school now, but they've been doing that since they were 4 years old. Everybody gets dressed in their snowsuits and their snow pants. And I think one of the biggest things about being a parent in a winter climate is that you lose about half an hour a day in the winter with getting your kids all dressed up and then getting them all undressed. And I remember a friend of mine moving to Florida, and she was like, that's one of the big time savings that she found in Florida, is that she didn't have to do that. Now she's also dealing with other things that I wouldn't necessarily want to deal with, but everything has its pros and cons for sure.
Yeah, totally. And I know you did some research for some temperature conversions. So
Yeah.
tell us what does it get down to when we're in the
So
winter?
yeah, so I think November, December, January, February, those are like November, you start to get out of fall and into winter. December, January, February are usually when people start to do their skiing and things like that. That's about, and on average, we're at 0 degrees here, Celsius, which is about 30 degrees, 32 degrees, I guess, in Fahrenheit. So that's what we're talking. There's definitely much colder days, but there's also much warmer days. We also get a lot of sunshine, which helps. So, I've looked at, even when I lived in San Francisco, sometimes the lack of sun can, not be fun. I love the fact that even on the coldest day, you will get some beautiful sunshine. And so that can make a difference on your outlook. But that said, my body remembers I'm Sri Lankan. And so I am like that cold person that is always cold. And there's probably 4 or 5 days a year where I'm like, I'm not leaving the house. I'm not doing anything. I'm staying in. Meanwhile, my husband and my kids are outside and they're skating or they're doing the tobogganing or doing something. So it all really depends on your attitude towards the snow. But I love like a nice hot chocolate sitting outside and watching them, but it's just not, it's not like I love winter person, but it's very manageable.
Yeah, it's pretty if nothing else. When the snow's on the trees and all that, it's pretty, and you get to watch your family have fun and chill with some cocoa. It sounds pretty good, actually. Oh,
Yeah,
I'd like to do
exactly.
the other thing and then do what you're doing afterwards. You could have it sitting there waiting for me when we're done doing the other thing.
Exactly.
Um, so
And
have
then,
you? Go ahead.
oh, the one thing I want to mention is we do have areas, like we have a ski area. Now, the ski area it's high for us, but it's not going to be, like we're not talking, if you want real skiing, you want to go to like Mount Tremblant or Whistler. But we definitely have like a great ski area that a lot of Torontonians go to in the winter. It's called Blue Mountain. And so that's the other thing, is that we have a lot of friends who are skiers. They don't play hockey, but every weekend they go up and they ski. So skiing is another big thing that you can do in the area. And there's several, I mean, that's just one area. There are different areas throughout Toronto that you can get to. Probably, Blue Mountain is probably an hour and a half, and the others are an hour to an hour and a half. So it's not that far. And people make it a day trip. Some people have homes up there, but skiing is another big winter activity.
And what's the main? How do you heat your houses? Main like here you'll see heating oil, electric heat pumps. natural gas. As of now, every new neighborhood is natural gas because we have it coming out our butts and it's the cheapest and burns, blah, blah, blah. So natural gas probably number one, and then some other remnants of other stuff. What do you guys heat with up there?
Yeah, that's basically it. Anything that was, I'd say 1950 and younger is going to be natural gas. Like we have a forced air furnace here. Some of the older homes, you're still going to see some boilers. You're still going to see some rads. There are, depending on the age of the home. But if somebody is building a home or moving into something that's newer than 1950, you're going to see forced air gas. So that's pretty typical. Now, when we bought our hobby farm at Barrie, which is just outside of Toronto, it's about an hour away. It was forced air oil. So, and it had an oil tank that they filled. There's people that come and fill our oil tanks and things like that, but that is not typical here. And our hobby farm is also, we have a well and we have a septic, versus Toronto. It's all city sewers and city water. We're pretty well a major city. So we are a major city. So everything is pretty modern.
When we talk about the prices, people will get that you're a major city. We'll get that in a little bit. So the cold climate, I'm guessing you have basements, because most cold climates have basements.
We do have basements. And basements are very much part of living space here, considered part of living. I mean, we don't count it when we put a listing up. So, if we have a 3,000 square foot home, that means it's 3,000 square feet above ground. So that doesn't include the basement. And a lot of times it could be a full basement underneath. But for example, in my house, we rebuilt our house and we have a full basement, and that is where the kids hang out. That's where the TV's set up. They also have a room where they practice hockey down there. Like it is very much part of how we use the house, and it is not treated like a basement in any way. When we were designing the house, we put in all the same kind of finishes and same kind of quality that we did for the rest of the house.
It's just below grade. Yeah, finished basements are huge here. Some people like Florida, they're all on slab, I think, or like most of the hot places seem to be on slab or beach places, and they don't get the basement. I relocated somebody from California, and they didn't have basements where they came from, and he kept saying, I need an outbuilding for my workshop, but most of the neighborhoods, you're getting a quarter, they didn't want to spend to get acres of land, and the zoning doesn't allow outbuildings, the thing that he needed. I kept saying, we have basements here. You have the same footprint worth of basement down here. Every dad has a workbench in their basement here. And finally he did. He put one in his basement. So I love me some basements.
Yeah.
And especially.
So we had a cottage property, and it had a basement, and the cottage property. So what we call cottages here are like houses basically. And I would never do a basement near a water ever again, because we did have moisture issues and we had to change the grading. And as the water changed, we had to change the grading again. So I think basements work in Toronto when, that's not an issue. But if you're in like a cottage property or a lake house, basements can be problematic for sure.
Yeah, you should build it. Anything near water should be built on stilts from now going forward for the most part. And I think that can get you out of, at least in the US, it's all about elevation, so it can get you out of flood insurance sometimes. Don't quote me on that. Talk to your insurance person, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, if for nothing else, you don't have to deal with it flooding. So we talked a little bit about what the landscape is like, or people probably got a little bit out of what we were talking about, what it's like. Here, we'll compare it to here again. Here, we're hilly, and mountains. We got the Appalachian Mountains, but it's not like huge Colorado or Vermont or Whistler or anything like that. So what do you like there? Are you flat because it's close to the water?
We're flat. So yeah, so Toronto itself, first of all, we're along the water. So we have some beautiful beach communities along the water. And when Toronto was originally built, our downtown core was actually abutting the water, but we built one of our main thoroughfares by the water, and it's awful, and it's an eyesore. So they're fixing that as we speak. But there's like very pretty popular neighborhoods along the waterfront. And then throughout the city, there's tons of parks. There's all kinds of things for as far as entertainment and activities go. And then, like I said, we're driving distance to other things like skiing or hiking and camping. We have a lot of we have a lot of provincial parks. We have a lot of federal parks that you can go hiking and camping and doing all of those outdoor things as well. But the actual landscape of Toronto is relatively flat.
And to get to those parks and everything, because Toronto's kind of, you're sitting on Lake Ontario, but then all the other lakes are kind of around it too. So I'm guessing it's all flat. So do you have to drive out and around all these lakes to get to these other places, or?
No, I mean, so depends on what you want to do. So like if I want to go to Niagara Falls to go and see the Niagara Falls, that's like an hour and a half to 2 hour drive, an hour and a half actually about drive. Most people with cottage, like Blue Mountain was an hour and a half for us. And we actually had, that's where our waterfront place was, near Blue Mountain. But if we're talking about Muskoka, which probably is our most famous cottage area, and there's a lot of celebrities that have places up in Muskoka. They, like Cindy Crawford has a place in Muskoka. That would be about 2 hours drive from Toronto. But, you know, when you get crazy traffic in the summer, it could be more. But that's about a 2 hour drive. So and these provincial parks, there's stuff that's an hour away. There's stuff in the city. There's stuff that's 2 hours away. But everything is like less than 2 hours. And it's especially when we were kids, we would do day trips because my parents couldn't afford to do hotels or overnight stays. So we would drive the hour and a half, 2 hours, spend the day at a beach, for example, and then come home afterwards. And it was fantastic.
Yeah, that's great. It sounds like the driving and the infrastructure for that is pretty, it's a super modern city, so it makes sense that it would be, but you can get most places. Before I go to the next question, which I popped up here a little bit prematurely, do people stay in Toronto when they visit the falls, or where would people typically stay when they're visiting the falls?
Well, so we also have wine regions. We have like wine regions in Ontario, and there's two major wine regions. One's in Niagara and one is in Prince Edward County. Prince Edward County is a little bit newer, but Niagara wine region is very well known. And so I think there's a ton of hotels in the fall, so people would actually stay there. But most people, when they visit Toronto, they make it a day trip to go to the falls. And we have a lot of like tourist buses that do that. As you know, you get on the bus at 7 a.m., you return at whatever time, and they take you and they show you around and all of that stuff. And I've actually
Made of the mist and walk underneath it. And
exactly.
all that.
Oh, you know, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Made of the mist. Yeah. So, and I've actually stayed on the American side and walked over to the Canadian side because we have a bridge there. I mean, you know, like, so it's pretty easy to do. And it's kind of neat seeing the falls from both sides of Canada, the US. So can't do that right now, but that's a pretty typical thing to do. And it's pretty great. So.
That sounds like a better idea too. The reverse. Toronto probably has a lot more to do with the food and culture, which we'll get to. And then just go as one of the attractions to the falls to check out. And I'm still waiting for them to let us climb in barrels and go over the edge. They haven't allowed us to do that yet, so I'll keep waiting. Somebody built a special barrel that you're supposed to like be able to do. Anybody could just get in the thing and do it or something. But anyway, so I skipped one. Commuting. We talked a little bit about the travel. You can get lots of places within a couple hours. Do people usually work in Toronto and then live in suburbs, or let's start with that?
Yes. So when people talk about Toronto, there's Toronto, which is the core, and then there's the GTA, which is the Greater Toronto Area. And there's probably, I don't really know how many cities in the GTA, but probably 10 to 20 cities within the GTA. And it is very, very common to live in one city and work in another. So if I think of 3 cities that are just outside the GTA, outside of Toronto and the GTA, if you zoom in, I could show you on the map. So Mississauga to the west, Pickering to the east, and Markham to the north is 3 of the several cities in the GTA. It's very common for somebody to live in Mississauga and work in Toronto, or somebody to live in Markham and work in Pickering. There's no, even though the different cities do provide different things, it's very common for people to live and work throughout, and it's very common for you to move throughout the city, depending on your job and things like that, and your point in life. So, I know several people who started off in Toronto when they were young and single because they wanted like the Toronto life. And then they would move up to a condo or a smaller house. But then when they really wanted something for a big family or just more space, they would move out to some of the suburbs where it's more affordable so that they could get more space. So that's that. So that is Toronto and the GTA. My biggest complaint about Toronto, quite honestly, is commute time. And
Did you make a video on this?
I did make a video on this. And okay, so there's 3 major reasons for our commute time. One is it's the GTA. It's not just Toronto. So if you live and work in Toronto proper, your commute time is okay. But it's the GTA. So lots of people travel, and commute times can be an hour and sometimes more, depending on where you are. That's the first thing. The second thing is our subway system, for the size of city that we are, is not as extensive as it should be. So if you compare us to, say, like a New York or a Paris, we're infantile compared to them. Now, that said, the Toronto Transit System, which is the TTC Toronto Transit Commission, which is our transit within Toronto, they're actually pretty good. They have subways and buses. They're clean, they're safe, and they're fairly reliable. But the issue is that the subway part of that isn't as extensive as it is. So because of that, if you have to take buses, your commute time is also more. And then the last thing that causes commute times to be long is construction. We have a housing boom in Toronto, so there's construction everywhere. We're also investing in our infrastructure, so we are getting more subways, but that's causing construction. And because we're a winter city as well, there's always things that people are fixing because of winter, like potholes and things like that. So yeah, commute time is.
Well, that's okay because we're used to all that stuff. I always say we're a big logistics hub, and everything from the north goes through us to the south, and everything from the south goes through us to the north. And our roads, and the east is older than the west, so all the roads are old. We have winter, all these things, terrible roads. Something's always under construction. It's like New York City. There's also always, it's not scaffolding, it's those orange cones on some highway. You have to learn which one I have to take for the next 6 months instead of let's avoid that route. So that's nothing new to us. That'll be we'll be right at home as far as the roads go and that goes.
Yeah. And when you're buying, what I always tell people is you just need to think about that when you're buying, right? Because there are faster ways of commuting, right? But you just, that's a big consideration when you're buying. So, and we do have lots of options for commuting, but you just have to plan for it.
Yeah, and some people don't have to commute anymore, so that changes everything as well. So what are, about employment, what are the major employers, the major industries there, other than tourism's probably pretty big, right?
Yeah, so the beauty of Toronto is that first of all, we have a diverse population, but we also have diverse employers, which is great because we're not reliant on one employer or one type of industry. When there's changes, there's other employers to work for. So we have big banks. So unlike the US, we have like some major big banks that are huge employers. And financial institutions as a whole, whether they be, companies like Onyx, who owns a bunch of smaller companies, or it be, some of the accounting firms, things like that. We also have companies like Magna and Celestica, who are manufacturers. And then the other big employer is the government. So if you are a resident of Ontario and you live and work here, healthcare is for free, right? And so the management of the healthcare, whether it be the hospitals, all the staff, all of that. So Ontario OHIP, which is the Ontario Health Insurance Plan, that is a huge employer. Our school system is also, we have great schools in Toronto, and our public school system, which is funded by the government, that's a big employer as well. So like I said, it's pretty diverse. So what's interesting that's happening in Toronto is we also have a pretty good tech sector, and we do a lot of things to attract more tech companies into Toronto, particularly startups and things like that. And what we're finding is a lot of the bigger companies are starting to choose Toronto as our Canadian headquarters. So, this year, Netflix, Amazon, and Reddit are all planning on setting up offices in Toronto, in addition to the ones that are already here. Yeah. So
HBO is still there?
HBO, no. So HBO, AT&T, when we got bought out by AT&T, they decided to close down some of the smaller HBO offices. They still have offices here for some of their other businesses, but not for HBO. And that was more about a merger than anything else. But remember, the Canadian dollar is also right now, one US dollar is worth about $1.25 to $1.30 Canadian. So for these companies that are investing in Toronto or Canada for that matter, if say they have to go and open an office, your costs are pretty cheap right now to go and open that office. Salaries are also cheaper right now. That may change because, our dollar does go up and down. But right now it's a great time to invest, especially if you're investing in office space and things like that.
Yeah, is it fair to say that Toronto is kind of like the New York City of Canada, or the London, the Dubai, the Sydney of Canada?
For sure, yeah.
Because that can kind of give people a picture. It's like a big city, and when we get again to the prices of the stuff there, you'll understand a little bit more. But this is like a big, giant city.
Yeah, there's three major cities in Toronto, Vancouver, Toronto, three major cities in Canada. Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal are kind of the well-known ones, and Calgary's up there. It can be up there too, but Toronto is definitely the one that everybody thinks of. And because of certain things that have happened, it is a more business friendly. So
yeah, it's definitely the first. If you ask me, the first name a Canadian city, Toronto would probably be. Well, I don't know. Is Whistler an actual city or town?
It is. Well,
that's probably what I would say first, but
Whistler,
after that,
yes, it's an area too. So yeah. So you fly into Whistler, yes, and it's
actually a perfect segue to what is there to do. I know that's way far away from you, but what is there to do where you are?
So there's a ton to do here, a ton. So remember, first of all, because of our diverse population, you can find entertainment any which way you want. So first of all, when it comes to entertainment, we have this huge Broadway scene. So most of the major musicals in New York come to Toronto. So our theater scene is great. We also have a lot of like smaller productions that would be brought in from around the world. So that's big. We also have, like we've already talked about the major sports teams. So you can watch any sports team you want. Tons of concerts. Artists from around the world love coming here because, first of all, they already have a built-in base, but then they know that because Torontonians are so multicultural that they have, they have potential to grow that. People love spending time at the waterfront in Toronto here, but they also love going to their cottages. They also love going skiing and doing winter activities around. And then, if you want to go dancing, you want to go to a world-class restaurant, there's tons of options and activities to do that. And so you're not wanting for anything. And then we host every sort of festival you can think of, whether it be, we have the Jazz Festival, we have the Dragon Boat Festival, we have Pride Week, we have Santa Claus Parade, we have everything you can think of, we're hosting it. And it's, it's something that's been around in Toronto forever. So.
And I would guess probably multiple of the, because it's such a big metropolitan area, that there are probably sub-metropolitan areas that are probably even bigger than our area that also have their own fireworks and celebrations and brew fests. And do you guys have Renaissance fairs up there?
We probably do. I mean, we probably do. Like, look, I've been to a busker fest. I've been to a Trekkie convention. I'm sure there is. So I'm sure if you need to find a fair of some sort, it exists. I've been to an Elvis festival. I mean, there's everything. Everything.
It's truly like New York. There's pretty much, and with all the employers, you got a lot to choose from with employment and food and everything. So I love the eclectic nature of it. Food, vacationing. So here's a question, because I like to leave about 10 minutes for the prices. So we're ticking through that right now. But vacationing, would you drive? Would you go to those beaches on Lake Ontario or whatever lakes you're talking about? Or would you go somewhere else to vacation?
For me, we definitely leave the country when we were allowed.
The entire country.
Yeah. So we would leave. I mean, there's lots of places within Canada that we've gone to, but we like traveling internationally. But we drive to things on the weekends all the time. So we do. We've rented a cottage for a week. Like this summer, we rented a cottage for a week up north with my friends. We've rented places throughout, Ontario to drive through to. But then my family has also traveled internationally. Part of that too is because of my job. A lot of times I would be traveling anyhow. So we love traveling internationally and have been to a lot of countries.
And what would the airport be? Is there a Toronto airport?
There is, and it's a big airport, and it's a big international airport. So it's Toronto Pearson, YYZ is our airport code, and you can basically get to anywhere you want from there. We have some smaller airports as well. We have one that's on the Toronto Island that I used to use that, and that airport, it services more smaller. I used to use that to fly to New York because HBO's head office was in New York. So that was an easy one to fly to New York versus going to Pearson. But yeah, Pearson, you can get to anywhere in the world. It's
awesome. And then last question before we get to what you get for the money. Stadiums, obviously you have all these pro teams. What would be the stadium you go to see? Justin Bieber's Canadian, isn't he?
He is, and Drake.
I use that name almost every time. I don't know why I do it, but that's the name I use when I'm talking about stadiums if you want to see a star, and he's Canadian, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's also Drake and The Weeknd, and we have Ryan Reynolds. I'm trying to think of the big ones that people know. So, Scotia Pond is our Scotiabank Arena is our major stadium for concerts because it also hosts the Maple Leafs. And if you are curious about that, it used to be called Air Canada Centre. So we do it switches dependent on the sponsor. And so the Blue Jays play in Rogers Centre, and the FC. I don't know what their stadium is called now, but it used to be sponsored by Bank of Montreal. So there's a few different, but the most famous one is the Scotiabank Arena. That's where Justin Bieber would play. That's where any major concert. We have a bunch of smaller ones. So, we have Budweiser Theater that I've gone to see, smaller. I went to see Lionel Richie at Budweiser Theater. So, by the way, he threw the best concert. People were making fun of me, and I was like, because the average age there was pretty high, but He was fantastic. But we've seen all like the smaller concerts are like that, or a Budweiser theater, and it's an open theater, and you go in the summer, and it's so much fun. That's also a great place. And so we have a lot of different venues for that. But the major one would definitely be Air Canada or Scotiabank.
Yeah, and it's a major city, so it's if the acts are stopping anywhere in Canada, the one place would probably be Toronto. So any act you're trying to see is probably going to be stopping there. And we've got about 5 minutes left, so we will get to the money question. Pun intended. What do you get for the money there? So average price here, let's say 250, 300 is kind of used to be 200. You could get a half decent starter house. Now it's more like 250 to 300 ish. How does that compare to where you are? I've already prefaced that it's a much more expensive market, but maybe start with, I don't know what stuff starts at, and then, I don't know, give us whatever idea you want to give us.
So we're an expensive city. The average price of a home here is $1 million. So in US dollars, that's probably about 750 to $800,000. That's the average price. So if we get more into specifics, condos are average prices are around 700, townhomes are around 900, and detaches go up to 1.7. But that's average price. But you have to remember, we have areas in Toronto that have $20, $30 million homes. Like Drake lives in an area called Bridle Path that you can buy a home for that price. But I'd say, when you look at starter homes here, it would be a condo. And, for about 500,000 Canadian, you're going to get a 1-bedroom or a smaller condo. Then when you get up to like between the 5 and 750, you're going to get into 2 bedrooms, and you might find smaller houses and things like that. But 1 million is really the sweet spot of opening up a lot of inventory across the board. You could possibly find a detached house, but you can find a townhome, you can find a semi-detached, you can find a high-end condo. Like there's a lot more options. But that's Toronto. And then as you move out of Toronto, the average price point comes down, your houses generally get bigger, and you have more options. So, housing prices in Toronto keep going up. So our immigration remains strong. Toronto is considered a safe city across the board. So The Economist magazine does an annual ranking of safe cities around the world, and they take 60 global cities and they rank them. And they rank them across 5 different categories. So it's like environmental safety, personal safety, infrastructure safety, health safety, and digital safety. And so, and it's across 72 different attributes of those. And Toronto came in second, and we came second to Copenhagen. And Toronto, and I have friends in Copenhagen, but Toronto is a bigger city and it's much more diverse. So the fact that we rank so high. So people like Toronto, they want to keep coming to Toronto. And it's a big place for immigrants, right? Like 50% of the population not born here. So this is why I think the real estate here continues to be strong, because it's just, we always seem to have a pool of buyers that are interested in buying Toronto. And when you buy a house in Toronto, you kind of know that your bank money is safe here and that the systems are in place, and there's not going to be some sort of, you feel safe in a lot of ways. So it's just a great place to invest. So
I think I could be wrong. Sorry, Copenhagen, and we got about a minute left, so that's why I'm interjecting here. But Copenhagen's is always on the happiest places to live list. Copenhagen's always up on that stuff. So to see yourself up with Copenhagen, I think is pretty awesome, especially when it's such a big city. So we literally have about 50 seconds left before I have to cut it off. So real quick, tell me in about 10 seconds, if you could do anything else other than being a realtor, what would you do?
I did something else, and I'm a realtor. Love it. Love Toronto. Love talking about it. And I love just talking, as you could tell. So this is a perfect job for me.
Awesome. And I'm going to leave, well, you can see her information there, but it'll also be in the description wherever you want to find it, and her YouTube channel where you can learn all about Toronto and more episodes coming out all the time. I'll put that in the show notes, as they call them, the description as well. Contact me if you need to buy or sell a home, or if you need to sell your house here to move to Toronto. I can hook you up with Connie. Call me, text me, email me, throw a rock through my window, send a carrier pigeon, whatever you need to do. We have about 10 seconds. Thanks for watching, and see you later. Say goodbye, Connie.
Thanks.